So good afternoon, everyone. So once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. So my name is Chloe, and I'm a Senior Research Analyst with the Research and Portfolio Management team at iFAST. And for today's topic, I'll be sharing about our new Asian tigers. So a reason why we're bringing up new Asian tigers is because we think that in this current and volatile geopolitical climate, it's increasingly important to examine if the incumbent Asian tigers are able to maintain their dominant position. And if this is not the case, then the next question to naturally ask is who will be the new Asian tigers emerging? But before we go into our new Asian tigers, let's just take a step back and look at the incumbent 4 Asian tigers. And this is Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea. So back then, these Asian tigers, they fascinated the economic world. From the early 1960s until 1990s, they regularly posted double-digit economic growth, and it transformed them from low-income countries to that of high-income ones. And throughout these stages, the Asian tigers, they benefited from various factors that contributed to their success. And these include your strong government leadership, stable political environment, as well as strategic economic planning and a lot of investments into the education and infrastructure. Not to mention, we do note that their geographical locations as gateways to Asia and their ability to adapt to this whole changing global environment played an important role when it came to their success. However, as we all know, we're increasingly witnessing a growing number of geopolitical conflicts and rising tensions between various countries, and they have come under the spotlight after the Russian-Ukraine war, as well as this ongoing war that is going on in the Middle East. And tensions between China and US have also been growing over time, and this shifting geopolitics between the US and China, it creates many uncertainties and also risks for many countries. But we do note at the same time, it also creates opportunities for some countries. And this whole structural stresses between the US and China, they will be further watched in time, especially as the upcoming US election in November this year. So this whole new Cold War between the US and China would help to actually shake the foundations of various countries and affect their prosperity as well as security going forward. And future growth would definitely need to take place in a world that is filled with geopolitical fragmentation as well as technological disruption. So with all this being said, we actually need to re-examine if the incumbent Asian tigers are able to maintain their dominant position in the current climate. For example, if we look at Hong Kong, Hong Kong is a country whose fortunes are being very closely linked with China, and they would be negatively impacted by this shifting geopolitics between that of your US and China. And we do know that Taiwan is a world-class technological manufacturing hub, and they would also be drawn into this whole political conflict of an increasingly aggressive stance that Taiwan is actually an undisputed part of China. And you can see that this whole political and potentially military confrontation, which will likely involve the US between that of China and Taiwan, would all further heighten the risk. And while there's no universally agreed upon criteria on who should be the new Asian tigers, we have identified some key criteria that would help us identify them. So in our opinion, these are the following criteria that we actually consider. So first and foremost, our new Asian tigers should be beneficiaries of the shifting geopolitics. They should also have sustainable economic growth in the next few decades. And there are a couple of ways to actually look at economic growth, but one of the key metrics that we look for when it comes to your sustainable economic growth will be via the current account. We think that countries who have consistently positive current account surplus will likely experience a more sustainable economic growth trajectory over the longer term. We also look at your supportive government policies, as this is, of course, an important factor to look at. Moreover, in today's digital age, we're looking at technological leadership, as this is increasingly an important factor to actually look and really consider. Last but not least, having world-class companies or world-class brands is important, as having all these brands with a global presence could contribute significantly to the economy. And with some of these key criteria in mind, I will be explaining in greater details our new Asian tigers and how we actually went about to select these new countries. So our first new Asian tiger is none other than that of Japan. So after a prolonged period of low or even negative inflation since the 1990s, the post-pandemic inflation pickup has been much more welcome in Japan compared to other parts and elsewhere in the world. And inflation is important because Japan has been fighting battles against deflation. So Japan has actually seen price and wage increases. And in 2023, companies in Japan, they offered their highest pay in the last 3 decades. And all of this is important because it helps to stimulate your consumer spending. And more importantly, inflation also means that there is a cost to actually holding cash. And with this, we actually foresee behavioral changes by households and corporations. So such of these changes actually suggest to us that Japan's economy is reaching a turning point in its battle against deflation. We also see a narrative unfolding for Japan's equity market. And it actually bid farewell to the whole era of underwhelming returns, particularly experienced during the lost decade. So this last decade was a period that was marked by prolonged economic stagnation as well as deflation since the 1990s. So the Nikkei 225 has embarked on a remarkable rally, and it boasts returns about more than 30% in your local currency terms in 2023. And the last time the index actually reached above the price level of 32,000 was actually more than 3 decades ago, before the lost decades. So we think there's a new narrative unfolding for Japan, and we think that the Japanese equity market actually stands to reclaim its lost decades of underperformance. Moreover, when we look at Japan's current account balance over many years, we see that even though its economic growth back then, in the past 2 to 3 decades, was pretty anemic, the country was still able to consistently post positive current account surplus, and we see all of this as actually a pretty positive sign. And there's a solid long-term investment case when it comes to Japan. As corporate reforms, they are making a breakthrough. So as shown in this chart over here, Japanese policymakers have actually made it an objective to actually improve corporate fundamentals and governance, and this journey actually started 10 years back. Unfortunately, since the pandemic, a lot of these efforts were put on pause for a while. However, as the economy reopened, policymakers are making a strong push once again. So the Tokyo Stock Exchange issued a mandate in March 2023 and actually pressured companies with a low PB ratio to more efficiently use their capital or potentially be delisted. And this has been very effective as many companies responded with your share buybacks as well as improvement measures in recent months. So we're pretty encouraged and seeing this progress being made. But of course, we also do note that this is still early days. There's much more to come as the Tokyo Stock Exchange enlarges your Japanese companies, including their management. And should policymakers actually continue and improve on these reform efforts, we can actually see Japan quickly becoming a hunting ground for investors seeking stocks that are not just fundamentally sound, but who also provide better shareholder value. For example, being supported by all these corporate reforms as well as their robust earnings, we see many Japanese companies like your Mitsubishi Corp as well as Toyota. They have been motivated to actually enhance the shareholders' returns through your share buybacks and dividend hikes, and this, of course, would benefit your investors. And the revival in Japan not only comes from corporate reforms, but it also can come from the country slowly regaining its status as a semiconductor powerhouse. So something to note is that Japan's chipmakers, they once dominated the industry in the 1980s. So back then, Japan chipmakers actually accounted for over 50% of the world production. So Japan as a country itself is trying to actually regain its lost status as a semiconductor powerhouse. And recognizing this whole importance of a strong foothold in the global semiconductor industry, the Japanese government has launched many initiatives that aim at fostering the growth of the semiconductor industry and also to try to actually support their own domestic players. So one major initiative that is being seen is this whole consortium of 8 major Japanese companies over here. And together with the Japanese government, they've committed billions of yen and established their own semiconductor company or manufacturer known as Rapidus. And Rapidus is now in partnership with IBM Research in the US, and they're trying to work towards developing your 2-nanometer technology by 2027. And going forward, they do have plans for fabrication in Japan. And rather than trying to just compete with your global chip giants that produce high volumes of all-purpose chips, I think this partnership or this whole consortium of companies, they're trying to focus on pioneering your specialized chips, such as those in the area of artificial intelligence. And these are chips that actually work in this whole area, and they're powered by low power consumption. Moreover, as global companies, they diversify away in terms of their supply chain from China, we think that going forward, Japan would also benefit. For instance, Japan is now being a favored location for TSMC's overseas expansion, and the chip giant is considering adding capacity and another fab in the country. So such an expansion by TSMC will not only help boost Japan's efforts to regain its status as a semiconductor powerhouse, but would also strengthen the whole semiconductor supply chain in Japan. And we also note that Japan has a pivotal automotive as well as electronics industry, and these two industries, they rely on this whole stable and long-term supply of chips for growth. And speaking of some of these pivotal automotives and electronics industry, we see that the company's strong industrial base has created many well-known and world-class brands in these areas. So your companies such as your Panasonic, your Toyota, your Sony, or Mitsubishi Corps, they're just examples of brands that have a strong global presence and who contribute significantly to Japan's economy. Besides Japan, our next new Asian tiger is none other than an incumbent one, and this is South Korea, who in a sense has actually managed to retain its position. So South Korea is mostly being known for K-pop music as well as TV dramas, but they're also known for their technological innovation, and all of this is actually supported by a highly educated and highly skilled workforce. So just like Singapore, with barely any natural resources, the country has actually put a lot of efforts into trying to maximize its export products and pursues this export-driven strategy. So global demand for South Korean products, they have been a significant driver in terms of economic growth, and the country has established itself as a global leader in the area of semiconductors, IT, as well as electronics. We also note that the country has recovered very strongly since the severe Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. And since then, the government actually implemented significant economic reforms, including your corporate restructuring and financial sector reforms, and helped the country to actually emerge stronger. So after the Asian financial crisis, South Korea has been able to consistently maintain a current account surplus and has witnessed strong economic growth. I think more importantly, given the importance of semiconductor, so we shared a lot about how important this sector is today. So we like South Korea because it's essentially a semiconductor powerhouse. And as the world advances in this whole digital era, semiconductors are actually the fuel that are powering these data-driven economies. And South Korea's semiconductor industry, it plays an important role as they make up over 20% of the country's GDP. And the country's dominance in this whole memory chip market gives it an advantage in this whole global AI race, as Samsung and 𝗂𝘃𝗲𝘁, for instance, are amongst the top producers of your memory chips. And your large language models, such as your ChatGPT, they actually rely on these high-performance memory chips to actually work going forward. So besides being known in the area of semiconductor, just want to also point out that South Korea has been able to propel itself in the global arena with many world-class brands and corporations such as your LG or Hyundai, besides Samsung and 𝗂𝘃𝗲𝘁. For example, I think the biggest competitor to Apple iPhones is also Samsung phones. And both of these brands actually dominate the mobile phone market share globally, and with Samsung not being far behind in terms of the market share when compared to Apple. And together, these two companies are the leaders within this smartphone market, and this actually shows this dominance of this particular South Korean brand. So last but not least, I think Singapore is actually considered to be our new Asian tiger. And so in a sense, we go all the way back to home. So Singapore is one of the original Asian tigers that has already achieved significant economic success. But we think that going forward, this country is still able to continue its growth trajectory in the future, as we see Singapore being the only major financial hub in Southeast Asia. And so it plays an important role in intermediating your capital flows in the region. And not to mention, the country's openness to skilled migration has also attracted talent with diverse background in order to fill the skill gaps. And this government's entrenched mindset of trying to actually invest towards prosperity has actually helped to build its cash coffers and has made Singapore one of the richest countries globally with enviable foreign reserves. And Singapore, as we all know, has consistently posted large current account surplus over the past 3 decades, and its strong economic fundamentals and fiscal position has also translated into the strong appreciation of the Singapore dollar over the past few decades, and this makes us one of the strongest currencies globally. And amidst all these ongoing geopolitical tensions between the US and China, Singapore is actually one of the countries that has managed to reap the rewards. And they're seeing heightened capital inflows into the region. And of course, this is being driven by our political stability as well as our stable macroeconomic conditions. So the country is a haven for your wealth hub as well as for asset managers. And it's often being dubbed as the Switzerland of Asia. And demand from Asia is particularly prominent given that many of the private wealth in the region has actually grown faster than elsewhere in the world. So Singapore is now a prime location for its political stability, as well as your low crime rates and lower tax rates for high net worth individuals. And all of this has brought in billions of inflow into the economy and could actually create tailwinds for the local bank's wealth and asset management arms, while also boosting the own local economy. And this will be a long-term driver for the country going forward. So besides, Singapore will also benefit from the semiconductor upcycle. And a significant portion of Singapore's economic growth actually stems from its exports, and there's a notable focus on electronics. So this underscores the importance of trying to actually examine the manufacturing sector, particularly in the semiconductor industry. And despite the prevailing sales downturn, we do think that we are in a semiconductor upcycle moving forward, and these factors will be further accelerated by the growing adoption of AI. As such, we expect to see strong growth in the country's GDP, given this whole rebound in the semiconductor sales. And underpinning our whole investment thesis is the fact that these chip makers will see a massive structural increase in demand as the world becomes increasingly digitalized. And And last but not least, Singapore, knowing that they do not have a competitive advantage as a manufacturing hub, has actually managed to diversify its economy beyond that of manufacturing into sectors such as your finance, logistics, tourism, as well as technology. So through such initiatives, Singapore has also created its own world-class brands and corporations such as your Singapore Airlines, as well as your DBS Bank. So just to sum things up, I think with the exception of Japan, who is one of our new Asian tigers, South Korea and Singapore are the two original Asian tigers who in a way have managed to actually keep their stripes. And we believe that it's trying to identify these new Asian tigers is something that is important because they serve as economic bellwethers. And more importantly, I think with the growing and evolving geopolitical conflicts and tension in recent years, it has actually altered this whole Asian investment landscape. And the tensions between US and China would present itself with challenges and opportunities for different Asian economies. So supported by your favorable government policies as well as a rebound in the semiconductor industry, we anticipate that Japan, South Korea, and Singapore will actually benefit going forward. So with all this being said, I think there's a pretty strong investment case to be made for our new Asian tigers, which is that of Japan, South Korea, and Singapore. So naturally, investors who do want to actually partake in the growth of these new Asian tigers would actually can consider the following products. And we have both your ETF as well as fund recommendations. So it's over here in the slide above. And with this, I actually come to the end of my presentation. So once again, I would like to say thank you for everyone for listening in and for being here today. And hope you have an enriching day moving forward.